Joining us now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, NBA insider. He's the host of ScoopB Radio. The one, the only, Brandon Robinson joins us here on a Thursday night. Brandon, my friend, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. You had me cracking up with this San Antonio talk. I wasn't sure if I was on the phone with Josh or Charles Barkley.
It is incredible, is it not, that San Antonio has survived that long and been that successful?
It's interesting. I actually spoke to Brett Brown about this recently because we talked about the parallel between the San Antonio Spurs and the New England Patriots. And you both agreed that, the Patriots and the Spurs have had longevity in the respective leagues for so long. They just find a way to get it done, whether it's just finding diamonds in the rough and having an adequate supporting cast of players. When you look at the Spurs over the years with Duncan and Tony Parker, David Robinson, Sean Elliott, and then you look at the parallel with the building around Tom Brady and then bringing in other guys around them, whether it's Gronkowski and all these other guys. They just find a way to get it done. I'm sure Philly doesn't really want to talk about New England or San Antonio, but, at the end of it, I think that Greg Popovich has run an awesome program in San Antonio, and we'll see what's next. I've heard some things, and, we'll see where that goes in the offseason.
So before we get to the Sixers, and you mentioned Brett Brown, we'll get to all that in just a moment. So with the Grizzlies winning, they have clinched a spot in the play-in game. And if I'm understanding the situation, so if Portland wins, it's Blazers and Grizzlies. If Portland loses, it's Grizzlies and Suns, right?
Yes. Yes, and just those who are paying attention in this area, John Morant and Jonas Valanciunas both had triple-doubles in this game. They just beat the Memphis Grizzlies, and worth mentioning, they did it without the Bucks. They're kind of gifted. Giannis Antetokounmpo was suspended for headbutting in the game before, so they got the win, and they live to see another day. But Damian Lillard, man, is hot. They play against the Brooklyn Nets to 9:00 Eastern time, but Damian Lillard is playing lights out and playing the way that they should have been playing all year. They've dealt with some injuries throughout the course of the season.
Wild. We could see argue on the best guard matchups for a play-in game, John Moran versus Dame Lillard for all the marbles. But in the Eastern Conference, Brandon, this Sixers team, we got to talk about this because Ben Simmons, he's out for the year with a loose body and his knee surgery. Joel Embiid last night, X-rays came back negative on his wrist, but who knows if he's actually going to play tomorrow night or not, or maybe he will. I don't know with him anymore. What is the state of the future of this Sixers team? I'm leaving it that open-ended because I'm at the point, my friend, where we got a team in Philadelphia right now called the Philadelphia Flyers. They're on fire, and they got this superstar young goaltender, and the city's losing its mind. But with the Sixers, everyone is exasperated in some way or another with Embiid and Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that, was expected to do big things. I thought that the Ben Simmons shift to the power forward position would have been great. Just in talking to Brett about this early on, we compared it to LeBron kind of, shifting off the ball. I remember in college at Eastern University, where I'm an alum, right on the main line, playing NBA Live 2004. And LeBron James was the starting point guard on the Cavaliers, and you had J.R. Bremer and, Ricky Davis and some of those other guys, Darius Miles on that team. And I thought it would be a similar thing, with Ben Simmons, making that comparison. Ben is 6'10", LeBron is 6'8", but they're both playmakers. They're able to distribute the ball. And the thing that I really liked about that team was the ample shooting of Shake Milton. He's a point guard that is a great distributor, can move the up-tempo speed of the game, but, Ben Simmons opens the floor up because he commands that double team, and you lose that. I think maybe the consolation prize is, you do have Tobias Harris. You have guys on that roster that can step up in Ben's absence, but there's no replication for missing Ben. There's no replication for missing Embiid. And it's a sad loss. I did reach out to a couple of people within the Sixers organization to get a prognosis of what it is with Embiid. I have not gotten a proxy of, will he play? I've not gotten a proxy of, what's next. But it is a disappointment that you have been not playing the rest of the season. If you pay attention to my podcast, the ScoopB Radio podcast, 2.1 million streams last year on all platforms. Before the bubble restarted, I did have Rashad Phillips, NBA analyst, basketball analyst Rashad Phillips. And one of the things that he said he had been hearing in the offseason, he said it, not I, was that the Toronto Raptors will be looking to move up in the NBA draft in the fall and would be looking to basically move up to get Lonzo Ball. And there was a proposed move, or at least a dialogue of that move, where basically it would be a potential 3-team trade where you would get LaMelo Ball to the Toronto Raptors. You would move Cardinal Doherty's high school's own their point guard Kyle Lowry to the Philadelphia 76ers, and then would ship Ben Simmons to the Golden State Warriors. That's something that behind the scenes he told me the Raptors are discussing. We have to see what happens where the seeding for everything with the draft and everything at large. But it seems as though people want to change in Philadelphia. When Rashad said that to me on the podcast a few months ago, I reached out to people within the Sixers for comment. Of course, no comment there, but you can check out that article that I wrote over at heavy.com. But it seems as though people have discussed, well, do the Sixers, if they have to choose between Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, who do you pick? Do you keep Embiid because he's a big man, he has a presence both on social media and just the fact that, he is a voice of that locker room and the Embiid, decision, or do you go with Simmons because he's a once-in-a-lifetime type player at 6'10", that can play point guard and more? So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But I do think that the Sixers at the 6th seed are competitive. It's just you're missing the bread and butter that got you there throughout the course of the season. I don't think the Sixers, or I won't say I don't think, I'm very concerned that the Sixers may have some struggles in the first round. If they play without both, they won't be playing with Simmons, but if they have a limited Embiid, they need Embiid in order to win.
Now, speaking of Embiid, you mentioned about the fact that, which one would you choose? So let's further go down that road. Which is the better player to build around in today's game? Because I have two conundrums. On one hand, I have this phenomenal talent who has constantly had injuries, and we know what is the best abilities or availability. On the flip side, you have this, as you mentioned, phenomenal once-in-a-lifetime talent in Ben Simmons, but he himself has limitations to his game that, for whatever reason, are holding him back. So which is the more ideal player to build around in a modern NBA world?
Well, I think if you're looking at, so I look at it from two aspects. One, product on the floor, and two, who wants to be there. So I'll go with who wants to be there. Embiid wants to be in Philadelphia. He likes the Sixers. He likes the city. He's embraced the city. I think in addition to that, he has a tell-it-like-it-is attitude that I think the fans like. Just in talking to Joel throughout the course of this bubble, one of the things that stands out to me is, he realized, even though he did not want to even show up for the bubble, he realized that the city was counting on him. He realized that, he's going to be safe, during COVID-19 and, be socially distant, but also come to play basketball. He's done that. I think when you look at the bubble, people who have outperformed and surprised in the bubble, everybody talks about Devin Booker. Everybody talks about Damian Lillard. But when you look at Joel Embiid is up there. If you give me my all NBA bubble first team, Joel is at the 4 to 5, and that's starting 5 for me. But I think when you look at Ben Simmons, you don't really get a sense of he wants to be in Philly. I think he's kind of just guarded, quiet to himself. But I think many people say, I'm not saying this, many people say he has his eyes set on somewhere west where he can be the face of a team, where he can have his stake in things outside of just basketball. And I'm not even talking the Kardashian stuff. That's what everybody wants to talk about. I kind of keep personal. in the business side of the business. But anytime you got a playmaker that's 6'10", has the ability to make teammates around him better, even switching to the power forward spot, loose particles in his knee or not, I think Ben Simmons is going to be okay. If I were the Sixers, me personally, just looking at things and analyzing it right now, because this is the second injury that Ben Simmons has had this season, and you get a sense that Joel Embiid wants to be in Philadelphia, I picked Joel Embiid, but I picked Joel Embiid because I think he's a chance of a lifetime player too. When you look at today's NBA game, people consider him a center. In the 90s, he'd be a power forward. In today's game, you don't see a lot of guys who can play with their back to the basket and can also catch your favorite team's power forward off the dribble defensively. To me, and I've been saying this for a while, Joel Embiid is Hakeem Olajuwon and Chris Webber in one. We know a little bit about Chris Webber during his time playing for the 76ers. We kind of got him towards the end of his career, but I know you remember him in Sacramento. Mm-hmm. I know you remember that pick and roll system under, Adelman and Pete Carroll. When you look at Embiid, speedy, limber, draws a double team. I think that if I were the Sixers, if I had to choose between the two, I'm picking Embiid.
Brandon ScoopB Robinson joining us here on the Boardwalk on the hotline. Make sure to follow on Twitter for all your NBA news at ScoopB. Also on Twitter, check out the podcast, ScoopB Radio Podcast. How much also does the Sixers' decisions moving forward get influenced by the emergence of Tobias Harris, who has turned into, in many ways, the bona fide leader of this team on and off the floor? And we don't just know that because of the Matisse Thybulle vlogs where you get to see behind the scenes, but also what we're seeing just in how he handles himself. He has handled himself on and off the court in a way that I think maybe has to influence the Sixers' decisions moving forward about how they build the rest of the team.
Yeah, I mean, Tobias Harris, to me, has always been that guy. I got to know Tobias during his time early on when he played for the Grizzlies and the Orlando Magic. He's from Long Island. We share a commonality with Jay Hernandez, who was his trainer, and then ended up becoming an assistant coach with the Orlando Magic. They're both from Long Island area and went to Hofstra for grad school. And I sat down with Tobias back in like January or February. These months are kind of like bunched together. And one of the things we talked about was when he addressed the Philadelphia fans before a game around Martin Luther King time. And we talked about how much he learned about just Black history. And, he basically told me, I'm pulling up the article now, you can read it at heavy.com. He talked about African-Americans, and there's been so many African-Americans who have done remarkable things and a lot of inventions that don't get, that things people aren't credited for it. And, we went from talking about Martin Luther King to Black history to leadership within the locker room. And he basically told me we have a lot to do. And he told me, in quote, direct quote, our biggest competitors are ourselves. I think he has embraced the role of being the vocal point of that Sixers locker room in a way that I think Jimmy Butler was in a mercurial sort of way. I don't want to use the word toxic. I think everybody leads differently. I just think that Tobias's presentation is a lot better to people, particularly Brett Brown. And so when I look at Tobias and what he's able to do, he really doesn't surprise me. I think for some people it surprises him, or it surprises people that he's as much of a leader as he is. But when you sit back and you look at last summer during free agency, Elton Brand legitimately had to pick between J.J. Redick, Jimmy Butler, or Tobias Harris. And I can tell you, Tobias wanted to be in Philadelphia as well. He liked Brett Brown, or likes Brett Brown. He likes Elton. He likes the other front office people. I think that they made a good decision. Now, how's that going to carry over into the playoff? That's a separate issue. I think that if we had looked at a Sixers team where you had Ben Simmons, a healthy Ben Simmons, a healthy Joel Embiid, a healthy Tobias Harris, we'd be talking. But that hasn't been the case. Many analysts were predicting or forecasting that the Sixers would make it to the finals and along came the Milwaukee Bucks, who, to be honest with you, I think are right on time, but are really 2 years late. I think that the Sixers, at face value, with the roster they have, can do things. I think Matisse Thybulle was a steal. I think Josh Richardson. I spent some time out in Orlando in the preseason, and me and Josh talked about how I felt that defensively, I think he's living a swingman's dream, both defensively and offensively. All he has to do is just put up 10 to 12 points a game, get some steals, and let the offensive work handle itself. And it doesn't seem like that dream for the Sixers as a whole, being healthy, is coming to a fruition, because you've got your two All-Stars hurt, and they're a 6th seed. Really and truly, I think they should have been a top 3 team this year, but injuries played a big part of it at the beginning of the season with Joel and later on with Ben. So Tobias Harris is being the leader that you described, but I think they need some added push and some added firepower, with Simmons down and Embiid being hurt.
I saved the best for last. We mentioned Brett Brown's name a few times here. I had Ben Golliver telling me about a month ago, he said the 76ers are the most disappointing team in the NBA this year. So I ask you, my friend, Brandon ScoopB Robinson, what do you point to as the reason for that disappointment? Is it Brett Brown? Is it the front office? Or is it the players?
I think that's a difficult thing to answer, but I'll use this as the precursor. The Portland Trailblazers did a lot with less, and look at how it turned out. When I look at the Portland Trailblazers, Ben Golliver knows a thing or two about Portland, him being out there for some time, him now in L.A., that's my dude. But the Portland Trailblazers started out the season with a hurt Damian Lillard, with a hurt C.J. McCollum, and they signed Carmelo Anthony, and they thought he was washed. And then they end up becoming the 8th seed in the NBA's Western Conference, and they're playing the Brooklyn Nets at 9 o'clock tonight in a play-in game. Portland doesn't have the bench that Philadelphia has. Philadelphia's bench could start. Philadelphia's starters, of course, they start. But at the end of the day, you have 2 All-Stars, and you've had Brett Brown in a Philadelphia system for years. There are teams with less patience in the NBA that may have terminated the relationship that they had with Brett Brown a long time ago, and the Sixers didn't do that. I mean, we're talking about the 12-win team Sixers back in the day with Nerlens Noel and all
10
those
wins.
other guys?
Don't forget about the 10-win team, too.
There you go. So you're now in a situation where you've been patient. You're now in a situation where you have the stars, and you're in a situation now where really and truly Philly was supposed to go to the finals last year. Philly's team last year is better than Philly's team this year. And the thing is, what Brett Brown is doing with Ben Simmons now was what they kind of did in third and fourth quarter situations last year, where you had Jimmy Butler running the offense, where you had Ben Simmons moving out the ball and getting to the basket. But it just seems it doesn't work. So when you ask Elton Brand about Brett, Elton looks out for his guy. When you ask Brett about Elton, Brett looks out for his guy. At the end of the day, I think there is some accountability that needs to take place, or some trades that are likely to happen. Because I think at the end of the day, it comes down to wins. It comes down to productivity. And I think there was a lot of expectations for Philly this year that really should have been their owners last year. In my mind, if I was looking at it from a fan's perspective, it's kind of like when LeBron James left the NBA's Eastern Conference last year. Great. Toronto's going to win the finals. Now you look at it this year, great. Kawhi left the Eastern Conference and is going out west. This was Philly's year, and it seems like even Toronto has a chance to make it back to represent the NBA's Eastern Conference, a team that's been very slept on. So it's to answer your question, I think there's a lot of blame to shift around. Injuries is the easy culprit early in the season with Ben. Later in the season, earlier in the season with Joel. Later in the season with Ben. I think it's not so much coaching as it is personnel. and strength. So I think they're going to have to make some decisions whenever their season ends. I hope they do well, but I do think Toronto and as well as the Milwaukee Bucks may have other plans.
Follow him on Twitter, ScoopB on Twitter. Brandon ScoopB Robinson, NBA insider, joined us here on game night, and as all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. I always appreciate the insights and candor, my friend.
Brother, thank you for allowing me to be myself. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely.